So what we're going to be covering today, so AI webinar, hopefully that's what you've come for. If not, see you later. So everything you need to know about using AI in advertising in relation to the legal regulatory risks. Promise you there are some pictures. It's not all going to be very boring legal speak, but what I want to do is just kind of go into the world of AI in a bit more detail. Just going to spend half an hour today, and with plenty of time at the end for questions. I appreciate it's a new topic, although it hasn't actually been around for that long. It's gaining more traction, and there's a lot of ambiguity, but I don't think that needs to be there. We just need to apply what we know and try and figure out how best to manage it internally as an advertising business, and also protect your business from the risks that AI poses. So who am I? I'm Kristy Coleman. I'm legal director in the IP and commercial team. I previously worked in-house at a very large UK advertising agency. Had a great time kind of seeing the start of influencer marketing about 15 years ago, which was fantastic because nobody really knew what was going on or how to regulate it. There was no such thing as kind of putting hashtag ads. Transparency wasn't really talked about, and it kind of gradually got more and more traction. So being involved in those very early days is really, really exciting. And that's what I can see happening here with AI is it's early days and we are just getting to grips with it, but we should be scared of it. We should be working with it. And the legal risks, yes, they're there, but there's lots we can do to mitigate those. And that's what I want to focus on today as well. So what are we going to talk about today? So what we think AI is versus what it actually is. It's far more than just pictures. The benefits, as I'm sure you all know, in advertising. And then the risks and challenges. So this is where we talk about intellectual property rights, regulatory compliance. I will touch on data protection. I am not a data protection expert, but it's an important consideration. And then what you can do as an advertiser to protect yourself and your clients. And a lot of that comes down to being open and transparent with your client and having a contractual relationship there that accounts for AI to be used or not used, and also who you're commissioning. Do you allow third parties, freelancers, to use AI in the content they're providing for you? Looking at a little bit of future trends, I'll touch on the AI Act from the EU. It'll be really interesting to see what happens from a UK perspective. I think what we'll probably see is a bit more guidance coming out of the ASA. And possibly a little bit of regulation, but we already have regulation to protect ourselves. It's about how that is applied and interpreted. And then conclusion, plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. So I'm going to test you now. Don't Google, just either speak or put in the chat what you think AI actually is. This is always really an interesting question because I always get different answers. So without thinking too much about it, just pop in the chat what you think AI is. There's no right or wrong answer. Feel free to speak up as well. I mean, obviously, artificial intelligence. But yeah, what do you think that actually means? So someone's commented, generated by the internet, an amalgamation of information from across the web's history. Machines thinking like humans. Yeah. A few more answers coming in, you know, when you see the dotted line going across. It's a bit of a mean question, actually, because there's so many different definitions of what AI is or could be. So artificial intelligence is where you take human intelligence and use machine or computer learning to replicate that. So it's learning models. It can use the internet, it can use software, it can use data to learn algorithms, to learn patterns, to generate an outcome that would otherwise be outputted by humans. And it's not to say that humans are going to be replaced by AI. I think it's a really powerful tool that can help us be even better. And especially in the advertising world, It's a great tool if it's used properly and with the considerations to the regulations as well, so you don't fall foul of the law. And so as to put access to all information online, conversion into accessible content. Yeah, which leads me quite nicely onto what we think of AI as being, and people kind of think ChatGPT. That's the first thing that tends to come into people's minds. And then they might think of pictures. So I've got some examples here of Chelsea's football shirt release. They used an AI generated image of the football shirt draped over Tower Bridge, and then they filmed content which looked like it was from social media user going, oh my gosh, look at this. Yeah, look at the shirt on the bridge. Now, question, is that misleading the consumer? A little bit. Do consumers understand that maybe that is an AI generated images? Yes, potentially. It's not new either. We've been using CGI for a long time. CGI is essentially manipulation of images to make something seem something that it may be not, or enhancing an image. So it's not something we have never seen before, but it's getting press, it's getting attention. And then there was a mascara brand that used a mascara wand with tube having eyelashes and a bust having eyelashes and going under the mascara wand. People didn't know if it was real or not. Turned out it wasn't. It was an AI image. And then there was a lot of backlash for a UK charity that had used AI to manipulate images of children, changing their eye colour, increasing dark circles around their eyes, just generally making the image appear far worse than it was. Obviously, children in poverty, terrible, but the use of AI was not great in this example, because it really encouraged that lack of trust in the particular charity concerned. And then KitKat took quite a funny take on AI and said, well, if we can all have a break if AI is going to do advertising for us. And this is a result of the advertising that was generated by AI technology. So we tend to think of pictures, we think of copy, we think of ChatGPT generating maybe articles, press releases, product descriptions for us. But AI is far more than that. When it comes to advertising, it's super powerful. And there are lots of different ways that we can use, especially generative AI, to help us when we are trying to reach different consumers, trying to personalize adverts, making efficiencies, developing new audiences, kind of creating that kind of population profile that you want to target using algorithms that AI then looks at, and because of its learning and how you've trained it, allows it to give you a deeper insight into the customer journeys, testing which adverts work and using AI to do that for you. So okay, fine, this advert works on this demographic, let's push more of that out. It's a really great tool to help increase efficiencies, looking at strategies based on previous learnings. So AI can do that for you. Again, it all comes with risks. And then I think it was quite good. There was a great advertising agency that kind of looked at, if we let AI do the advertising, they looked at KFC, Colgate, and I think Gucci, and it came up with some pretty horrifying images, which you can see just down there on the right-hand side, which I personally really don't like. But they were saying, this is what happens if you use AI and you don't interact with it. But it's there as a starting point. So when it comes to images, yes, AI can be really useful, but you need that human element to work with it. So it's almost like an inspiration. So you can get inspired by something. I mean, not that they are particularly inspiring. The KFC ones were even worse, but it's a useful illustration for you to see how it can be useful, but it isn't to replace humans. It can be used to help us be better. But with that comes IP considerations. And that's where I want to get into the detail of what the risks are, especially in advertising, and how you can protect yourself against those risks. So benefits, accurate and objective insights. So if a machine is trained properly, and that's an if, it can remove that human bias. But also, as you'll know, if you've used AI before, it can generate its own bias, algorithmic bias against certain population groups, certain assumptions based on what it's learned. So there's a real risk there from a reputation point of view as a brand, as an advertiser. And that's something we need to be aware of, that when we're using those algorithms, we need to train them. We need to make sure that we remove those biases, even those ones we have as humans that we might subliminally be putting into the machine, or maybe we're not picking up on those nuances. So training it to get that accurate and objective insight is key. And when it comes to personalized ads, AI is great at being able to find where they're best placed. But with that, you've got conversion rates, cost savings, but also you've got to be careful that you make sure you have that human oversight. You don't want to be placing the spend in the wrong place. And with children in particular, or products that are restricted, so alcohol, gambling, cigarettes, vaping, HVSS foods, AI needs to be trained to understand the parameters in which those foods can be, or those products can be marketed. And there's another risk there. The inspiration point is great, but also we need to be thinking about who we are asking to create content or create algorithms for us, the software that we use, and the IP rights concerns. And in consumer perception, so we know from the research that consumers have a deeper brand loyalty, where they feel connected to the brand, where they feel the brand is connecting with them, and AI helps advertisers get closer to that. But what do we do about the risks and challenges involved? So I'm sure you've all seen kind of lots of deep fakes recently, especially with the American election, and deep fake images being used to show what happens if Biden wins. And that's actually put a bit more pressure on the US to legislate against the use of AI, how AI is used, and the use of deep fakes. So deep fakes is where an image is taken and it's manipulated in a way. So, for example, a celebrity could be used to make, Cara Delevingne was in one recently, and to make localized ads. So she was in different locations. She wasn't actually in different locations. A deep fake was used to show her in different locations, but to appeal to people in those population groups. And that was really interesting because it meant she didn't have to have the time traveling around. The cost, hopefully, for the brand was lower, and it was a quicker way of getting adverts out and also relating to the consumer a bit more. So deep fakes are a risk because you run the risk of misleading. You could mislead the consumer. And that's the real issue, especially when it comes to UK law. It's one of the most fundamental things we need to make sure we avoid, is don't mislead the consumer. You still need to be honest, decent, truthful and transparent when you're marketing to anyone. And when you're using deep fakes, so even like in the makeup industry, they show models of different sizes, different skin tones using the products. Yes, it does reduce costs, but could it also fall foul of the regs because you're misleading consumers? Are you exaggerating the capability of a product by enhancing images using AI, or maybe the copy that you're writing to go with it, or even the people that you're targeting? And what's really useful is we do have a lot of guidance that we can apply to AI that isn't specifically written for AI. But if you look at the cosmetic rules that the ASA have published, a really helpful starting point, because it talks about pre and post production uses of manipulated images, and that can be applied to AI as well. So we do have some tools there that we can look at to help us manage these risks, and obviously don't materially exaggerate the effect a product can achieve. Again, that's a simple principle that we have about not misleading the consumer. And there's also really interesting filter guidance from the ASA about the use of filters on social media. Again, we can apply that to AI. And I think what we're going to see is that we're going to get more guidance rather than regulation about how AI is used in the advertising industry responsibly. But in my mind, I think there's a lot of it that's already there. It's about piecing that together and applying it to the particular content at hand that we're looking at. And if we're looking at intellectual property rights, who owns the image? If you're talking about AI generated image or AI generated copy, who owns it? What if you've taken inspiration from an AI starting point, like those Colgate pictures, and you've developed upon that and you've created your own image from that, but using parts or substantial parts of the AI image? So it's working out what happens there, but also understanding that if you are asking employees to use AI technology, or maybe you're not, are you accounting for that in your contracts? Do you expressly state that? I've recently gone through an exercise where we've been updating digital agencies' contracts to make sure AI is included, and it is excluded from certain content that's submitted to the brand. And that's really important. But the IP principles remain the same. Now, if you're looking at metaverse powered by AI, it gets a bit more complicated. If you're working with a brand that's using the metaverse to promote their product, and you have an avatar wearing the brand on a piece of clothing that the avatar's designed, and they've got an NFT on it, you get into really tricky territory about not only just IP, but jurisdiction. Where does jurisdiction lie? What rules apply? So intellectual property is a really important consideration, but not one that you can't navigate. It's just something you need to kind of have an open conversation about. Make sure you're clear in the business, your parameters, what you want to allow. And then data protection, obviously transparency is key. Making sure if you're using data to generate AI-based responses, getting that clear consent from the consumer. If you're running a questionnaire, or you're doing any kind of market research, being clear about what that's going to be used for. Or if you're collating data, it might be you're running a prize competition, you're trying to get data from users based on that, because you want to train an AI model. You need to be really, really clear. The same laws still apply, and that's something that we tend to kind of forget about. We see this as new technology, everyone's very excited about it, but IP, data protection, the normal regs still apply, and there's a reputational risk as well. So when I first trained as a lawyer in IP, defamation was an area that I had some experience in, and it was really interesting. Reputation is such an easy thing to damage. So it's very easy to generate something using AI and get it wrong, and that's if you don't have that human element. So I'd say that's a real risk. Someone going, oh, that's a really cool ad, like they get that it's being made using AI, versus, oh, right, okay, I thought that was real. I feel a bit my trust has gone with that brand now. So their charity, for example, was a really key one that caused a lot of issues. So being very transparent with the consumer is key, and that's what the new AI, the European Act, is trying to do, is to try and increase that transparency. So being clear that it is created using AI. How you do that isn't clear either. I think we're going to see the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology give us a bit more guidance on what's going to happen in the UK. But we need to be upfront. And to do that, we need to think about how to protect yourself as a business, how to protect your clients. So the first thing I would say is to plan, to look at the AI tools you use in your business, do like a mini audit. It might even be that you've got employees using AI tools that you didn't know about, just using in the course of work, and actually go through a bit of a risk analysis with that and work out, okay, what's being used, where is it being used, what content's being generated, what output are we getting from this? Is it strategy? Is it a targeted marketing plan? Is it content that we're then using and passing on to the client? All of these things are really important to have boundaries around, and to understand internally through your own policies and processes what is okay, what's not okay, and what level of human supervision you need. And that helps you mitigate the risk. And especially with clients, having a contract in place that talks about AI. We will use AI in the course of our providing services to you. We will, you'll explain where that appears. But that's really, really important for transparency for the brand. Should the brand ever get any backlash and you haven't mentioned that, you'll be in trouble as the agency. But really important for us to kind of keep having these open conversations with brands. It's not cheating, it's not taking shortcuts, it's about efficiencies, it's about enhancing what you can do, how quickly you can do something, and how much deeper you can get to the consumer, like that connection that you can get through AI much quicker by using some of these incredible tools, not just ChatGPT. And looking at data impact assessments, looking at what data you're collecting. If you've if you've got an information, a data protection information person in your office, make sure you utilise them, get them involved in the conversations around using AI, the data that you're getting from that and the data that you're obtaining to use. And then if you're using third-party software, AI software, you're making sure you understand what you're allowed to do with that content that's generated, because a lot of the time there will be a license, you won't own it, and then you're allowing the client to do whatever they want with it, but you haven't had the right to do that. So being really clear, doing that audit is how you best mitigate those risks, and thinking about the IP perspective as well. And especially with influencer marketing, I would say it's fundamental that in all of your contracts, you make a decision whether or not you would allow a content provider to use AI in the content that they're producing. Again, transparency rules will apply, and that's something we need to be very aware of. But there is some guidance out there, as I said. The ASA guidance on use of filters and also on cosmetics and pre and post production is really useful to just help formulate a bit of a guide for you when you're using these AI generated images and where that line lies. So there's a few things that you can do to mitigate the risks, but it's about being open, it's about being transparent. And in the future, I think what we're going to see is that kind of requirement to make it clear to the consumer if an image has been made or manipulated using AI. And that's where you need to adapt. So, yes, do all of this now, do a bit of an audit. It will take a bit of time, but it'll be well worth it. But then be aware that you can't just sit back and relax, put your feet up, because it's ever changing. You need to make sure you're keeping up, keep reviewing your plans, keep adapting to the changes, keep abreast of the law, make sure you know of any new guidance that's coming out, and implement that into your business. Update your contracts accordingly, have policies in place internally, and put in some training. It's a really, really simple way. Do's and don'ts using AI in the workplace. It can be that simple. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it's necessary for you to protect your business. So what's the future hold? Forgive me, my PowerPoint skills are pretty terrible. I'm not an advertiser. I am a lawyer, hence the very boring slides, but try to make it relevant. So the future. So we need to work with AI, not against it, even for lawyers. I had a client say, well, for my lower value contracts, I'm just going to run it through AI, which obviously terrified me. And I was like, well, you need a human to look over that as well. We do play an important role. We need to work alongside AI. We can be fast, we can be quicker, we can develop a deeper understanding of the consumer using AI, but you need humans there. There's the global nature of it, which creates an issue of jurisdiction, what laws apply and where, especially the metaverse. It's really complicated, people don't know. So, is there going to be an area where we have a bit of co-regulation, EU, UK? Are we going to follow the AI Act that the EU have drafted? Are we going to kind of make something a bit more looser for us? We can look at the US model, we can look at what China's doing. How is the UK going to legislate for AI? I question, do we need to? We have intellectual property laws, we have clear guidance on misleading the consumer regulation. Is it a case of just understanding AI better and the outputs and applying what we already have in terms of regulation to the outputs that we're getting from AI? Or do we need to regulate AI as a separate thing? I'm not sure. It'd be really interesting to see. I think guidance is really important. I think the ASA are going to be publishing some guidance in the next 6 months, hopefully. And I imagine it will be an amalgamation of what we've already seen around transparency, not misleading the consumer, not exaggerating your product, all of those things that we are already aware of. It's just about applying it to slightly different outputs, if you like. Use the CGI isn't new. Deep fakes are not new. Back in 2019, Nike bought an AI algorithm-based business to help them with assessing customer journey. It's something that is new tech, but it isn't new in the industry. We do need to understand that it's here to stay. But I'm not sure too much regulation is needed. It's going to be very difficult to legislate all of these different parts of AI anyway, because it's so vast. And like I said, I think we've already got the bones of what we need to help us understand the parameters in which we need to work within. But the key thing, as I said before, is that transparency point. So there is huge potential to mislead the consumer, especially if you're relying on content providers and social media. But the same rules apply: honest, decent, legal and truthful. So keeping that in mind, being clear. I'm not saying everyone needs to put hashtag AI generated. Maybe that's the way it's going to go. It's not at the moment. So don't do that. But I think we are going to need to have a bit more transparency, and there will be some more guidance coming out about how we do that. And it's about that kind of trust with the consumer and reputation and getting that balance right. But when it comes to business risk, it's about being open with the client, and how you're generating the work that you're doing. And reputation, again, it's really key. It's looking at the future with a bit of a longer lens, and not having too much kind of worry about this. It's about working with it and taking responsibility as an advertiser. Which leads me on to questions. So yeah, if you've got any questions, either pop it in the chat or feel free to talk to me like a real person. And yeah, hopefully we can have a good discussion.
Thanks, Kristy.
Hi, Matt.
Hello. Yeah, I've got a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so a lot of the AI chatter at the moment is around large language models like ChatGPT, that one in particular. And my question is really, how do you know whether you're breaching IP if you're using something like that? So not that we are, but let's say you asked it to write you a parody of a song. Or actually forget that, because then that's another IP issue. Let's say you asked it to write a script for Coca-Cola. It came back with something that you liked, and it had a particular set of words in it and phrases. How do you know it's not lifted that from Jane Austen or J.K. Rowling? Or how do you navigate that?
You don't know.
Yeah.
That's the risk of using it, is that you simply don't know. The non-technical way of checking is to randomly select bits of text and Google it and see if it comes up in a search. Used to be my job when I was a paralegal at Penguin, checking rough guide content. But yeah, you don't know, and that's the biggest risk. So I would say that human element of taking the work that you're presented with and adapting it yourself. And copyright can occur if you copy a substantial part of a work. Now, that doesn't have to mean the whole of it. If it's a Jane Austen novel, could just be a sentence, could be a string of 5 words. And you mentioned songs, even less, if it's a kind of particular catchy part of it. So I would be careful, go through it as a human, use it as a starting point by all means. I actually tried to get ChatGPT to write this for me, but it didn't work out. So I had to use my brain. Yeah. But no, it was a useful starting point. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a different angle I could use. So use it with caution, but that's where the human element comes in. But it can give you a really good starting point to get inspired, and then you can then go, right, okay, you might not recognize anything in there, but you always run the risk of something being scraped. And if you look in the terms and conditions, they absolve liability for copyright infringement. So use it at your own risk is what essentially is said.
Thank you.
So I've got a hand up. Ed.
I've got my hand up.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
Ed. No, quick question. So are there examples already of agencies, marketing agencies, advertising agencies who have been rumbled and have been prosecuted, have got into trouble with their use of AI?
Not yet. No. In China, there's a recent case that's going on, not with an advertising agency, but with a brand, about the use of AI. The reputational risk, again, is a journalistic one, but there haven't been any court cases in relation to an advertising agency. I mean, we're still very much in the infancy.
Thank you.
Doesn't mean to say there won't be. I hope not.
I'm sure there will be at some stage.
Yeah, but it's probably going to be a breach of contract issue with the client, to be honest, and more than likely get settled before it gets to court. I think that's the problem, isn't it? Is people don't see there being any action being taken against people from using AI. And so it's a bit of a wild west. But again, if you go back to influencer marketing, everyone was doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing now, and people just finding their feet with it. So I think it's just a matter of time. And then in October, we've got the new the Digital Markets Bill that comes into force. And that gives the Competitions and Markets Authority more power against businesses to take action if you're misleading the consumer. And misleading the consumer could include AI, so you might get an enforcement notice. Obviously the ASA have limited powers, but they still can publish rulings that say you're in breach of the CAP code or BCAP code. That's always a risk. Negative publicity. But then sometimes publicity is good publicity if you're getting more traction about the advert that you've run, which is great, or the campaign. But yeah, it's a really interesting area. But I think kind of having that starting point of doing that like audit internally and figuring out what it is you're using, how you're using it, what you're doing to mitigate the risks is going to help you reduce the risk as a business. Got any more questions?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, great, thank you. A few more moments if anyone's got any more questions. But yeah, thank you for coming today. I don't really feel like I've given you any definitive answers, but I wanted to kind of open the floor to discussion and in a positive way, because I think it's a good thing we have this technology, but it's how we use it wisely and how best we can mitigate as a business to prevent falling foul of the law. Hopefully that won't happen. But yeah, I'm sure more will come in the next 6 months. We'll see guidance from the ASA, which will be really helpful. And with the EU AI Act coming into force, again, that's going to change things and put a bit more pressure on the UK to do something. Hopefully encourage a bit more innovation would be brilliant. So I'd like to reduce the regulation if possible on businesses, because I think we've got enough to deal with. But the regulation's there. We know what we need to do. We know about transparency, about not misleading the consumer, and how to utilise this best to help brands connect with consumers. Ed and Ian have just asked if we can share the slides and if we can access video at a later date, would be able to find it. It's a really good question. I will find out for you. I don't know the answer, I'm afraid. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.